Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to today's webinar, an in-depth look at ASP.NET 17.1 presented by DevExpress technical evangelist Don Wibier. In this session, Don will explore some of the latest features in detail and discover how to apply them in your own web applications. This webinar will include WebForms as well as MVC samples. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Don.
Thanks, Amanda, and welcome everybody. Today, I'm going to highlight a number of interesting new features which Mehul and I already showed in the What's New webinar of our latest release. I will start with two small demo projects, a WebForms one and a similar MVC one, which are running on a previous version of our suite. And I will then highlight a couple of interesting things that you can do with 17.1. So I guess that I've set up a small agenda here, which I will show. So once we have seen the application, I'll switch over to a 17.1 environment where I use the project converter to convert the older version basically to the 17.1 version. And we'll take a look at a couple of quick wins by just upgrading. So there are a couple of things that will work out of the box. And then I'm going to show you our new customizable material compact theme and how to apply it in the existing application. Next, I will show a small UI enhancement on the editors that we have, and you do need to enable them. They're not enabled by default, so that's why I'm pointing it out. And I will talk a bit about some new and really awesome grid view features as well. And these features are available for the card view as well, but I'll show them in the grid view anyway. And then I'm going to talk about the new hint control that we introduced, and I'm going to show you how to use that on a couple of different scenarios. And last, if there are any questions, well, you can obviously type them in the chat box already, but if there are any more questions, I'll see if I can answer them at the end of the webinar. So let's get started by switching over to my demo application that I prepared. And let me see, this one is the well, I've built this one on the 16.2 version something, and if I run the application, it's just a small little demo where I implemented some default behavior which comes with the grid. So we'll have a data source, a couple of columns here. The site is set up in a responsive way, so if I will resize this browser, then you'll see that it will nicely do a couple of things that are already available in the previous release. Furthermore, I've set up the editing functionality here, and we can do some filtering and searching. Next, I have a second tab, which is the agenda. We'll have a small feature here as well, and I have a demo on the rich editor as well as on the spreadsheet. So that is basically what I've set up with the demo application. And the nice thing is I've also set this up in the MVC version as well. So I have added another application in the solution. And let me double check if we're actually running on the correct instance here. I have an MVC version as well. It basically does the same. So let me start that one up as well. And I didn't include all the pages. For instance, I left out the rich editor and the agenda because these are a couple of features that are available after we upgrade. But the grid is pretty much the same here got the same functionality. And I have included the spreadsheet control as well. And this is as said on the MVC version of our controls. All right, so as I mentioned, I have already project converted this solution to the 17.1 version. And if we take a look at that one, for everybody who hasn't seen or are not aware of the project converter, the way that DevExpress works is as soon as we have a new version, you can use a tool that we ship with the product, which is the project converter, and it allows you to set up or to update all references to assemblies of the version that you're currently using. So in this case, I started this one up and I ran it on the solution, and then my solution is ready for 17.1 in this case. Well, and again, let me boot up the application, and you'll see it looks pretty much the same as the other one, though we do have a couple of quick wins here. And one of the quick wins that we have by just upgrading to the newer version is that we have some extra features in the rich editor and the spreadsheet control. So I'll switch over to the rich editor here. One of the things that we support with 17.1 is the support for floating objects. So if I would paste in a bit of text here, and I would like to insert an image here as well, well, I can just use the same approach that most of you are used from in Word. So let me upload a small one of my holiday images here. And let me also switch over to full view because I didn't align it to be full size. So if I now make this picture a bit smaller, we can actually set some layout options here, which allows us to determine what happens with the text, if it goes around or behind or in front, etc. So this is something which is pretty similar as the functionality found in Office and particularly Word. So this is just working out of the box by just upgrading. And as you can see, it will more or less float basically. Another thing that is available now is on the spreadsheet control. Well, basically there are two interesting features here, and one of them works out of the box, and one of them you have to enable because we can't enable that specific feature by default, but you'll see that in a sec. The first thing is that if I have a cell here with some text or a number in there, I can right-click that cell and place a comment, just like this. And I can do that with a whole bunch of cells. I mean, I can do it with empty ones as well. So if you have a spreadsheet document that needs to be filled in some form or shape, then you can place comments, or if somebody makes changes, etc. That is now being supported by the spreadsheet control, and you don't need to do anything for that basically. The second thing, which is an interesting feature, specifically if you use applications which incorporate like a small portion of the spreadsheet control. So maybe you need like a couple of cells to do like some formula or some calculation, but just like a small one, because in this case we have a whole bunch of columns and we have a whole bunch of rows. Well, maybe you only need like a small portion of that. So what we have done there is we have included support to specify a worksheet display area. And what that means is that you can basically limit the number of rows and columns on a specific sheet. And well, this also makes sense why this is not enabled by default, because it depends on the situation if you want to use it basically. So the way that works is if I switch back to my Visual Studio instance, Let me go back to the WebForms version first, and I'll show you in the MVC version as well how that works. The spreadsheet code behind file has a protected page load method. What we need to do to specify that worksheet display area, we can insert the following code here. So I'm checking if we're not doing a postback. Here is the spreadsheet, the reference to the spreadsheet, and it's got a sub configuration object worksheet display area, which has now a method which is called setSize. And if we would actually check the worksheet index is the first parameter, so if you have several worksheets you can specify it per worksheet basically. And in this case I will limit the maximum amount of columns to 7 and the rows to 10. And if I now hit the application, if I start the application up again, you'll see that we have a tiny nice little worksheet basically. And yeah, as mentioned, in some situations this is a really nice feature. Well, I mentioned before, I'm also going to show you how we're going to do that in MVC, because maybe some of you are thinking now like, hey, you did something in code behind, and we don't have that with MVC. You're absolutely right. So that's exactly the reason why I'm going to show this in the MVC version as well. Let me see, I've already set up the spreadsheet view, and I have a partial view to initialize and configure the spreadsheet. So what we can do here in the settings configuration object, I can now code in, yeah, basically a method which will be executed basically in the pre-render phase of the control. And I can use an anonymous function for this. And I can next do something similar as what we did in the code behind of the WebForms version. I can insert the following lines of code. The S from this method is the reference to the spreadsheet itself, so I will cast that over to a spreadsheet object, and then we'll have the same configuration available here. And with this in place, I can now run the application again, and you'll see this is a slightly different range that I specified, but let's see, I should now get a number of columns and 20 rows. I specified 6, I think. Yeah, so we have 6 columns and in this case 20 rows. So this is how you would implement the feature in the MVC version of the spreadsheet control. Well, and with this in place, we have we have a number of quick wins on specifically the spreadsheet and the rich text editor. I would also like to share with you that we have introduced a new theme for all of the controls, and this theme is something which most of you already are familiar with, because it is the material theme which is shipped with basically all Google devices these days. So whether you have a phone with Android or a tablet or maybe a Chromecast or another device from Google, it's all with the material design. And we already had this material design, but we decided to take it as a tiny step further, because material is really good for touchscreens and stuff like that, but for desktops it takes a bit too much space basically, because the original material design is optimized for touch experience. But on a desktop machine you have a mouse, and you would probably better like some more screen real estate to be used by your application. So what we did here is that we have introduced some smaller padding, some smaller margins, so that it looks a bit more compact, but it is in the material design basically. And with 17.1, it's quite simple to switch your entire application over to this new theme. There are several ways of doing it. I will show how we do this in the web.config. I can just scroll down to the DevExpress configuration settings, and I am now using the Mulberry theme, and I can switch that over to material compact like this. And if I now refresh my page, let me see if I am on the WebForms part. This would be it. If I now switch over to the home page here, you will see that we have this awesome, really nice material compact theme already applied on our application. And well, it looks like the Google theme, and if you don't like the green color in this case, you can actually change that green color pretty simple. And you already probably saw it in the web.config, because we can specify a base color as well as a font here. So what happens? Well, we at DevExpress, and me particularly, we love orange. So let me change it over to orange. And if I now hit the refresh button here again, we have changed the green to the orange, but everything is still looking crisp and sharp. And yeah, this is something that a lot of your end users will appreciate probably, because yeah, a lot of them have an Android phone, so they know how it works. And you see the nice little effects. I hope you can see it on the webinar software. So yeah, this is just a really well, good looking theme. You also saw another thing in the web.config, and that is that we can also change the font. So the font that is now being used can be changed with one line of code. And well, I didn't point it out, but in my CSS I am using a Google font as well, which is the Railway. So I can just specify that here. And if I reload it, you will see that everything is, that font is now applied on the grid. And yeah, I mean, I'm not really like a graphic designer or whatever, but I do not like this font on the grid, to be honest. So I do like it on the titles of the page, or I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I'd like the original font better, so let me remove that. And also it could be that that font is like a bit bigger and that things might fall out of proportion, so maybe some text will be hidden in a cell, or I don't know, whatever, depending on the font. But anyway, this is just a small detail on how to customize this material design theme here. All right, we can also do the same, obviously, with the MVC version. I will leave the MVC version on the Mulberry, so we all have an understanding on what page we're looking at right now. I think that's nice, actually. So I'll leave that one, but it goes exactly the same way. So if I switch over to the web.config, we have the same configuration settings here, and you can pull the same tricks, and it will work out of the box. All right, so another thing that we did, well, it's only a small thingy, but I still like that we included it now. It is a UI enhancement on the editors that we ship with the controls, with the suite. And let me show you what I mean. If I hit this edit button, you'll have this nice form, and it concerns all these controls inside the edit form. In this case, we have a null text which says state in this particular box. But if I click it, it's gone. And yeah, now I don't know what it should be anymore. Maybe one of my colleagues told me something and I forgot what I was doing. So it's not really a big deal because I can go here and there. But we can now hit one specific effect on this because we can actually determine that null text should be visible until we start typing in this box. It is a feature that is not enabled by default, but it is quite simple to set it up. So the way that works is if I go back to my WebForms application here, let me go to the default page. Well, I have configured the grid to use the pop-up edit form, and if I scroll a bit down, I have configured the layout properties. I was a bit too far already, so here is my layout which is used for the edit form, and you can actually use this in design time as well. If I now find the state, let me see where it was. The state is here. I can now specify a number of properties here, and you can also do this by the designer, by the way. So if I switch over, I can go to the designer, and I will just demonstrate the state. That was this one. In the text box properties, there is a new property which is called null text display mode. And this is the old behavior. If I want to use the new feature, I can select the unfocused and focused option here. I'll only do this one to give you an impression on how that works. And once I hit the build button or the run button again, you will see a slightly different effect here. So I'll edit. Yeah, this one has a state, so let me pick one which doesn't have a state. Most of them don't, but I happen to pick one with. Alright, so here's the same one again, but watch what happens if I click this box. The state is still in it, so I mean 10 colleagues can talk to me or do whatever I want, and I look back at the screen and alright, I was entering the state. So small detail, but yeah, I think it's a very useful feature. And this is available for all the editors that we have that support null text. So another thing that I'm really well, I think it's a really nice feature is we have included the support of a toolbox with the grid view. I'm going to talk about that one right now, and I think this is just great because what you already see on this screen is that the command column that we have on the left side is taking up quite a bit of space here, while other cells are being truncated because the text doesn't fit in the cell. And I mean, it's all the same. I mean, I could change them over to icons to make it a bit smaller, but it's still a lot of icons of the same stuff basically. And yeah, it would be nicer if we could get rid of this column and use a toolbar on top which does the same. You could already do that manually with some JavaScript, etc., but we have made it way easier now to do this kind of behavior. So let's take a look on how this is being done. We can do this by the designer. We can also do it in code, but I'll show you the designer because we have put a considerable amount of work in the designer. So yeah, why not show it off? If I open up the designer, we have a feature browser here, and one of the things which has been added is the option toolbars. And yes, you read it correct. There are toolbars, so you can actually have more. But I'll start with one to keep it simple and to give you an idea how easy it is to set this up. The toolbar, I want to have the items aligned to the right. Default is left. And I want to have it on top of the grid, and this also explains the toolbars in the feature browser, because you could also have another toolbar with some other features on the bottom of the grid, for instance, or wherever you want. And then I would also enable adaptivity, because the website is in a responsive layout anyway. And I can now start adding buttons here. So I'll start with one child, and I'm going to add another one, and I'll start with 4. And the trick is you want to trigger a certain action on this grid. And the way that we've done that is really, really nice, because we can actually specify a command here. And if I pop down this thing, then you'll see a huge list with commands here. And if I would now say I want this button to do a new action, invoke the new action, I'll just specify it here. And the second one, I want to do the edit one. Well, let's search that one up here. The third one, I want to have the delete feature or method. And the last one is going to be the show customization window. Let's start with that. Let's do this one. This is something I'd like to show you in a minute as well. This is also something which is very, very nice, but let's stick to the menu first. And we even support groups in the menu. So if I specify begin group on this particular item, hit OK. I can now, well, you already see design time what's happening. We already have a nice custom toolbar on top of the grid. Let me disable that column, the command column. So that was somewhere around here. I'll comment it out, so in case we don't like it, we can switch it back. All right, and look what we have. This is something which I like a lot. I can now actually go to one of those cells. I can hit edit, and I'll get that record. And for all of you who have implemented this functionality manually, you know it's quite a bit of work to get this all working. Everything is working right out of the box. I can actually change it if I want to. So let's make it like another Frankfurt here. It works, and it was just setting a number of properties basically. I can also start adding a new one. I won't do it right now because the database will probably not appreciate that, but that's another issue. And I could also delete items. So this is a thing which is set up quite simple, and this will also be possible obviously with the MVC version of the grid as well. We'll specify the same configuration properties in that configurations object in the partial view, and we're all set. And to show you how this is actually being done in the markup, we have a section added here, which is the toolbars, and you'll see there is just really little markup necessary. And another nice thing, because I enabled the adaptivity, if I make the screen a bit smaller, look what's happening with the menu. I make it smaller, 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 and oops, there we go. I'd say this is an excellent, nice feature. And if we would make it a bit smaller, then other buttons will show up in that ellipsis menu as well. So really, really nice. There is this one thing though, because you see that show customization dialog button is disabled now. And this is another really nice feature that is implemented with 17.1. You might remember that you could like have the column chooser and do a bit of filtering, sorting, grouping, etc. Well, on a touch device, that was not the best experience. So on a tablet, yeah, try dragging a column in and out of that box and stuff. So we implemented some new customization feature here, which is our customization dialog. And the reason that the button at this stage is disabled is because we need to enable that dialog also on the grid. And the way we can do that by code, or we can use the designer for that. I'll include it by code because it's only a small fraction, and let me put it next to the other settings. So I'm going to insert the settings customization dialog, and I'm going to put the enabled on true. If I now hit this again, you'll see that this show customization dialog is actually enabled now, and that's because that feature has been activated. And once I hit it, you'll get this beautiful, nice and new customization dialog which comes with the grid. It's in the same look and feel as the rest of the skin, so it's got the orange, it's material, and here we can start sorting. So maybe I want to sort on date, maybe I want to do a bit of grouping, like group on billing country, for instance. Maybe I want to do some filtering here. I can say invoice date should be equal to a specific date or whatever. And yeah, you can actually do this all with a touch device as well, as you can imagine here. And once we have done everything, so maybe you'll want to disable the billing state. Maybe you don't find it that interesting. I can just disable this column altogether. If I now hit the apply button here, you'll see that we are grouped, we are sorted, and yeah, this is very, very nice. This makes me pretty happy, I have to say. So another nice feature which you can turn on with just a couple of things here, and yeah, it gives your end user a real nice experience here. All right, so another thing that we have done is we have actually created a new control, which is the hint control. And well, though it is available on WebForms as well as MVC, it also has like a server-side declaration in the markup, etc. It's really more like a client-side JavaScript thingy, basically. And let me show what I mean with that, because there are a couple of ways that you can use that control with, and it works really nice. And that also, the way that it works explains that it is more like a client-side thing. So let me, to give you an idea on how this actually goes, is let me include a small HTML fragment here, which is just a simple span. It can be any element, and it's got a little text in it, and I have applied a class on this, a CSS class. This class doesn't have anything specified in the CSS. I have just given this name because the hint control is actually going to use this particular class to perform some action. So if I now include that hint control, I could get it out of the toolbox. I can also use code completion for it. It will be ASPX hint. I'll give it a run at server and a nice ID here, which I will call show me a hint. In this case, doesn't make much of a difference, but it needs to have a name anyway. And this is actually one of the really nice things on how to trigger that particular hint. I can specify a target selector, and what we mean with this target selector, this is the class. In this case, it is going to be show me the hint. And this is basically the selector where the hint will trigger on. You see, so these two match up. And then I'd like to have some text in there as well, so the hint can have a content section here which has some text here, something like this. And well, let's see how this works. And this absolutely works the same in MVC as well. I'll show you in a minute. So I included the hint. I set up a couple of properties on the hint, and basically what happens if I now hover over that show the hint, here is the hint. And the funny thing here is that if I would actually get that span, so let me get this one, and I'll move it all the way down, like under the grid view in this case. The trick is I can change whatever, so I can make this show the same hint, but I'll leave the class the same. It will now trigger, if I refresh the page, that hint will also be triggered because that selector is the same basically. This is one of the tricks. I mean, we can also specify a number of effects on the control, like animations or shadows or the color of the hint, etc. But that's all specified by in the markup or by the object inspector. I thought it would be interesting to show you how this works. And well, to do the same kind of thing in the MVC version, and let me get back to the grid view here, and pretty much do the same thing. So the grid will be rendered inside this div. If I get that same span, I'll just pop it in here, and well, I could now use the insert MVC instantiation wizard here to include the configuration of the hint and basically do the same. So let's wait for a sec that it shows up. And then we can actually specify all the same properties. So the show me the hint class selector is necessary. So here it is already. I'll call it show hints. All right, so yeah, I was putting in the content text. It's just basically similar as the WebForms version. I can specify a couple of more options here. I won't do it right now. Just insert it, and well, you'll see that it's pretty much the same. And once we run this application, let me put this up as a startup project here. You'll see that it is working quite the same as its WebForms counterpart. And because it works in a way like this, so here's the hint, and there we are. Okay, so I didn't do the coloring, but you can specify that as well. So pretty straightforward. But what is more interesting is a combination of the grid of the hints together with the grid view. So for instance, if we go back to this particular grid, you'll see that all those buttons or all those cell texts have been truncated because it doesn't fit in the columns. You can use one hint control to accomplish that same trick. And the way that works is actually pretty straightforward once you've seen the first trick. Let me go back to my markup here and make this one the startup project. And this will also work for the MVC version as well. Yeah, we should go to the grid, not the spreadsheet in this case. I'm going to include another hint control here. So let me scroll up a bit. And I will include the grid hint, which is looking as this. So this is my grid hint control. It's the same kind of thing here. The only thing that I did here is the target selector. And this is obviously a very nice feature that comes with the grid. It will invoke on all elements which have this DX ellipsis text. And guess what? This cell here will have that. This cell will have it as well. So I could actually inspect that, check it out. And you'll see that there is a bunch of cells here which have that ellipsis one. And that is something which is really useful, because now we can trigger that hint automatically without almost any additional code. There's one little thing that we need to enable on the grid, and that is we need to include a client-side event here. And the client-side event, I'll first put it in and then I'll explain quickly what it does. Well, you'll probably see what it does. Whenever a callback has taken place on the grid, I will update the internal hint control, basically client side. And if we do this, if we do it exactly like this, and I'll hit the run button again, then you'll see that the hint has been updated. So it is now showing me the Burgerstrasse. This is apparently in Germany, yeah. But we also have the Barbarossa-Strasse. Oh, this is all stuff in Germany. And we've got some stuff in France as well. So this is basically the trick, and we obviously did a bit of things in the grid and the hint control to make it work like this. But yeah, as you see, it's pretty easy to set up once you know how this hint control works. Well, you can actually think of very much things. I mean, you can request content from the server by initiating a callback and get some text from the server. We actually have some nice samples for that available. And yeah, you can do because it's all client side. It's got a nice client side API. You can do whatever tricks you like with the hint. So yeah, a very useful feature to give your end users some more information in case they need it. Well, and as I mentioned, this works exactly the same with the MVC version as well. So I see I still have a bit of time, so I can implement it on the MVC version as well. If I go to the index here, I can render out another hint control. I can do it by copying. It goes a bit faster here. I'll call it the grid hint, and well, you can continue here by specifying this. So as I said, it's pretty much the same, and I can remove this altogether. Yeah, with this in place, it should work on the MVC version as well. This was the wrong one, so let me put it on the startup. Yeah, and apparently I configured the grid slightly different, so it doesn't show me the ellipses on the columns. So that means that we won't get the hint here after all. But in case you have the grid configured to use the ellipses and the columns should stay the same width, then it will obviously occur, because as long as the DX ellipsis is rendered in the cell, it will pop up. So, yeah, and with this, I would like to hand things over to Amanda. I don't know if there are like any questions here.
Hey, Don. A lot of questions have been coming in as you were presenting. The team has been stellar in the background and has knocked, I think, most of them out.
Excellent. Excellent. And sorry, I do have a small recap to summarize what we have actually discussed. So by upgrading, you'll have a couple of quick wins, as we did discuss, like the floating objects in the rich text editor, the display area, and the comments in the spreadsheet. I didn't show the agenda view in the scheduler actually. That is another thing that works out of the box. I can show that really fast actually. It's good that I had the recap for myself as well. If I go to the agenda, and let me first switch over to the old version. So here we have the agenda. Obviously I didn't include it in the MVC version, so I'll start this WebForms version up again. In the scheduler, we have a number of views here: day, work week, full week, month, and timeline. And what you see in a lot of applications, specifically on mobile devices with smaller screen real estate, we have introduced the agenda view as well here. And this will actually give you a list with all the appointments that are upcoming, sorted by date, basically. And this is just a matter of upgrading again. Yeah, and then we obviously talked about the customizable material compact theme. We talked about the null text improvements that you can enable. And well, obviously one of the really cool features, the toolbar, which is supported out of the box with the grid view and the touch-friendly customization dialog. And last, the hint control. I've shown you a couple of scenarios on how to use them and how it actually works. And yeah, as I mentioned, I didn't mention it before, but the project that I have been building or I have been showing is available on GitHub. I'll make sure that the latest version has been committed like in about 15 minutes from now. So with this, Amanda, I would like to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Don. All right, everybody. Like I mentioned before, today's webinar will be made available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel. I posted that link in the chat box. A lot of you were asking about Angular. There are a couple Angular webinars we've already done. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can search Angular and you can find, I think there's 3 or 4 that Mehul did, and I think Paul and Julian have done in the past as well. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Don. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.